Hello everyone, today we're going to be going over the entire math section from an official SHSAT practice test. Today's test is from the 2024 to 2025 SHSAT Student Handbook, so it's the same people that make the Specialized High Schools test. They also make practice tests for us to study with. This is one of them. The link to that is going to be in the description of this video, and we're going to start off with number 58. 58 asks us to simplify negative 3.8 plus 2.3 minus negative 1.1. All you have to do here is remember your order of operations, right? You have to remember your PEMDAS. So parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And you're just supposed to go in order of what operations to do. Here, the only operations we have is addition and subtraction, right? So all you have to do here is literally go left and right and add or subtract. So if we're going left to right, we're left with negative 3.8 plus 2.3 minus negative 1.1. So left to right, we have negative 3.8 plus 2.3, which is negative 1.5. And then we have negative 1.5 minus negative 1.1. Now, a quick trick here, whenever you're subtracting by a negative number, or you have two negatives next to each other, minus, minus, that's the same thing as saying plus. So negative 1.5 minus negative 1.1 is the same thing as saying negative 1.5 plus 1.1, which is equal to negative 0.4. Moving on to number 59, it says that the angle of M and R are supplementary. Okay, if two angles are supplementary, they add up to 180 degrees. So off the bat, we know that M plus R is equal to 180, okay? The measure of angle R is 5 times the measure of angle M. So R is equal to 5M, or 5 times that of M. Why? Because the measure of angle R, is 5 times the measure of angle M. So R is 5M. And it's asking you what is the measure of angle R. So all we have to do here, we already know that M plus R is 180 because they're supplementary. We have to just plug in 5M for R. So now we have M plus 5M is equal to 180. Where did I get this 5M from? Well, number one, I read the problem, and then I replaced R with 5M. R is equal to 5M, so you could just write it in there. Now you have 6M is equal to 180, and M is equal to 30. Now, if R is equal to 5 times M and M is equal to 30, R is equal to 5 times 30, which is 150. So R has to equal to 150 degrees. Right, number 60 says that a mixture contains 3/16 gallons of apple juice, 340 gallons of cranberry juice. How many gallons of apple juice per gallon of cranberry juice does the mixture contain? So here we're dealing with a ratio, okay? Whenever you're dealing with mixtures, it's usually a ratio. That's how we get drinks to taste the same, no matter if it comes in a 2-liter bottle, a 1-gallon bottle, or a small can, right? Everything follows a kind of a big ratio, right? And that's always going to be true. So in this case, we have a mix of apple and cranberry juice, and our ratio is going to be 3/16 apple juice, which I'm just going to say AJ. And for every 3/16 gallon of apple juice you have to add 3/40 gallons of cranberry juice, which is going to be just CJ. This is how we get this fruit punch mix to always taste the same. Now they're asking you, how many gallons of apple juice? So X gallons of apple juice is needed per gallon of cranberry juice. Whenever you see per gallon or per unit, like per mile, per hour, per whatever, in this case per mile and per gallon, okay, and you don't see a number, assume that it's 1, okay? So this is actually asking you how many gallons of apple juice per 1 gallon of cranberry juice, okay? Even though there's no 1 there, per means 1 in this case, okay? Per 1 gallon, per 1 mile, per 1 hour, okay? Per just implies that 1 is there. But the 1 isn't shown, but there's always going to be a 1 there, so it's per 1 gallon. So all you really need to do here is turn this ratio and make one of the terms 1. Specifically, you need to make this 3/40 into 1, so you can multiply by 4/30 on both sides. Multiply by 4/30 on both sides, you get that 40/16 gallons of apple juice is needed for 1 gallon of cranberry juice. And that simplifies into 2.5. So you have 2.5 gallons of apple juice for every 1 gallon of cranberry juice, okay? Whenever you write ratios like this, the way I like to think about it is you write the regular ratio on top over here, and then you write what you want to convert it into on the bottom. So here I want to know X gallons of apple juice per 1 gallon of cranberry juice. So we don't know the amount of apple juice, but we do know that there's 1 gallon of cranberry juice. And now I just want to turn whatever's on top into whatever's on bottom. So how do you turn 3 over 40 into 1? Well, you multiply by 40 over 30 on both sides. So number 61 says Mr. Chan's lawn grows 2 1/8 inch every 2 weeks. He mows his lawn every 2 weeks and cuts off 1 3/4 inches of the lawn. If Mr. Chan's lawn was 4 inches tall at the beginning of the season, how many inches tall in decimal form is Mr. Chan's lawn after 8 weeks? So he has this plot of grass that he cuts every 2 weeks. We know that how much it grows or how much it goes up by is 2 1/8 inches. And we also know that he mows it or he cuts it every 2 weeks, and he mows it down, he decreases it by 1 3/4 inches. So notice how we're growing more than we're shrinking, which means that the lawn is still going to go upwards. But it's not going to be growing by that 2 1/8. It's going to be growing by that 2 1/8 minus 1 3/4. This is what we're cutting off. This is what we're growing by. So let's just evaluate this because I want to see how tall or by how much his lawn grows regularly. So in order for me to do this, I need to convert these into improper fractions. So that's going to be 17 over 8 minus 7 over 4. Which is the same thing as saying 17 over 8 minus 14 over 8. Why did we do that? Because we need to get a common denominator to subtract. And we left with 3 over 8. So every 2 weeks, his lawn is going to grow upwards by 3/8 of an inch. Okay? Now, how many inches tall is Mr. Chan's lawn after 8 weeks? So we know that we grow by 3/8 of an inch every 2 weeks. So if I want to know how many inches it grew in 8 weeks, what do I have to do here? Well, I just need to multiply this value by 4. 2 weeks times 4 is equal to 8 weeks. So I have to do the same. I do 3 over 8 inches times 4, which is the same thing as saying 12 over 8 inches. So in those 8 weeks, his lawn grew 12 over 8 inches, right? That's how much it went up by. And we add that to the 4 inches of lawn that were already there. So at the beginning of the season, his lawn was already 4 inches tall. So all you have to do is 4 over 1 plus 12 over 8. Or in this case, 32 over 8 plus 12 over 8. You get 44 over 8 or 5.5 inches. Okay? It's as easy as that. Just follow the problem. Number 62 is a little bit tricky. It says that the table above shows the number of children in each of 110 families. And it's asking you what the median number of children in these families is. So the deal with the median is a middle value. Okay, so the median is the middle. Is the middle value. Okay, so if I have the data set 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, if I just have this set of data, the middle number is going to be 3. My median is going to be 3 because it's directly in the middle of all of my data. Okay? So that's generally how you're going to find the median. Okay? Usually by crossing numbers out on both sides, and then you find whatever's left in the middle. When you have an even number of data, for example, instead of just having 5, let's say you have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I try and find my middle, I'm left with 2 numbers. If I cross out this 3 and cross out this 4, I have no numbers left. So in this case, you have to add these two. You do 3 plus 4, and you divide it by 2, and you get 3.5. Okay? So that's how we find the median generally. But in this case, we have data from 110 families, which means that if we want to find the median, we're going to have to draw out 110 pieces of data, which is way too long. So there's a trick to find the median. The trick to find the median is you take the number of data, you add 1 to it, and you divide it by 2. And this is going to give you the position of the median. Okay? So in this case, we have 110 families, which means that there's 110 pieces of data. Okay? All we do is we add 1 to that, and we divide it by 2. So that's going to be 111 divided by 2, which is equal to 55.5. So the 55.5 is the position of the median within the data set. So what I mean by this is if I were to actually find the median by crossing everything out, well, I would have to arrange it from least to greatest. So I would first have to draw out 45 zeros. Then I have to draw out 32 ones. Then 2 19s, or 19 twos, and so on and so forth. But notice how every single one of these numbers has a position. This is the first piece of data, the second piece of data, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, so on and so forth. What my trick here told me is that the 55th and a half piece of data, or the number between the 55th piece of data and the 56th piece of data, is going to be my median. So let's just arrange this. We know that from 0, that 0 is going to be my first piece of data. And all the way up, I'm going to have 0, 0, 0. So 0, 0, 0. All the way until my 46th piece of data. Okay, then I'm going to have a 1. Okay, then I'm going to have 1, 1, 1 for how many times? Well, 32 more times. So 45 plus 32 is going to be 77. So my 1s are going to continue until 77. So my last 1 is on the 77th position. And I can stop here because guess what? If I know that my median is going to be the 55th and a half number, that falls between 46 and 77. I know my median is on the 55th position. Guess what? 55 is between 46 and 77, so I know that my median has to be 1, right? And that's going to be the answer to this. Remember this trick, right? You take the number of data, you add 1 to it, and you divide it by 2, and that's going to give you the position of the median. Okay, it's not going to give you the actual median, right? 55.5 isn't even a value on here, but it's going to tell you where it's located. And you have to know that every single one of these points has a location. This is the first one. This is the 46th one, is when you start having 1s, and this is the 77th one, that's the last time you have 1s. 55 falls between those 2 points. Moving on to the multiple choice questions, or multiple choice section, it said that Mr. Jones has 550 goats, which is 10% more than Mr. King has. How many more goats does Mr. Jones have than Mr. King? So Mr. Jones, or Jones, has 550 goats, and this is 10% more. So 550 is actually equal to 10% more than Mr. King has. So that's equal to King, or in this case K, times 10% plus K. Whenever you want to find 10% more of something, all you have to do is you have to find 10% of that and add it back to yourself. For example, if I have 10 pencils, let's say I have 10 pencils, and my friend has 10% more, how many pencils does my friend have? Well, I first need to do 10 times 10%. In this case, that's going to be 1. And does my friend have 1 pencil? No, she has 1 more than me, right? We know that 10% is equal to 1. So I have to do 10 plus 1 to get 11, and now my friend has 11 pencils. So notice how whenever you have to deal with percents, you are taking 10%, you're taking the percent of something and adding it back to the total. So in this case, we're taking 10% of what Mr. King has and adding it back to King. So this is actually going to equal to, 550 is equal to K times 0.1 plus K, or 550 is equal to 1.1 K. And Mr. King has 500 goats. Now it's saying how many more? So 550, which is what Jones has, minus 500 is going to give me 50 more goats. Number 64 says, if 2y over x minus y over 2x is equal to blank over 2x, and x is not equal to 0, what expression is represented by blank? In other words, if I were to go ahead and evaluate this, if I were to take away y over 2x from 2y over x, what's the numerator of my fraction going to be? And the way you do it is you just find the lowest common denominator and do the math, okay? So in this case, what's the lowest common denominator between x and 2x? Well, it's going to be 2x, right? I can turn x into 2x, and boom, that's the lowest common denominator. So how do I turn 2y over x to have 2x as its denominator? We just multiplied the top and bottom by 2. And now you're left to 4y over 2x minus y over 2x. And this is equal to an unknown value over 2x. Well, whenever you're subtracting not decimals, but fractions, how do you do that? Well, you keep the denominator the same. That's why we have 2x as the denominator. And all you have to do is just subtract the numerator. So the numerator is 4y minus y, which is going to give you 3y. So 3y has to go into this blank space right here, which is going to be choice G. Number 65 says that in the figure above, PQRS is a square. So we know if it's a square, it has all these sides are going to be equal to one another. And if points P and R are on the circle, if the area of the square is 4 square centimeters, what is the area in square centimeters of the shaded quarter of the circle? So we know that the area, or this entire square filled in, is going to equal to 4, right? That is 4. We also know that the area of a square, where the a of a square is equal to s squared. We know that the area is 4. 4 is equal to s squared. Take the square roots of both sides, and you know that s is equal to 2. So each one of these sides is equal to 2. Now they're asking you, what is the area of the shaded quarter of the circle? You should know that the area of a circle, a, is equal to pi r squared. So you take the radius, you square it, and then you multiply it by pi. What's the radius? The radius is the distance between the center and the edge of the circle. So the distance between the center and the edge is 2 in this case. So my radius has to equal to 2. Okay? It's the distance between the center and any point along the edge of the circle. And it's always the same. If this radius is 2, this is 2, this is 2, this is 2. It never changes. So we know my radius is 2 because this point starts at the center of the circle and ends at the edge of the circle. Its length is 2. So the area of this circle is actually going to be 4 pi. And they're asking you the shaded quarter of the circle. Okay, so the answer isn't actually going to be 4 pi. They're asking you for this smaller part of the circle. We know the whole circle is equal to 4 pi, but we need to find this small shaded in part. We know that it's a quarter of the circle, and quarter means 1/4. So what's 1/4 of 4? Or what's 4 times 1 over 4? That's going to equal to 1. So the correct answer is B, pi, or in this case 1 pi, or just pi. Number 66 says that a list of consecutive integers with m ends with n. So in this case, consecutive means in order, and integers means whole numbers. So a list of whole numbers in order, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are all consecutive integers because they're following in order. What comes after 1? 2. What comes after 2? 3. This 2, 5, 3, 9. This is now consecutive because they're not following each other, right? Consecutive means it has to be the exact number after it, okay? So this is what they mean by that. And it begins with a number m, okay? So we don't know the actual beginning, but we know that it's m. And then there's numbers in between, and it ends with n. It ends with the number n. And we know that if you take n and you subtract it from m, you get 66. It's asking you how many integers are on the list. Well, let's look at the example that I put up here. Okay, let's say that our m is 1 and that our n is 6, right? Let's just say that there's 6 integers on this list. If I take n minus m, or 6 minus 1, I get 5. Now, notice how many numbers are on the list. Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it's going to give me 1 less than the total numbers on the list. Well, why is that? Because if you start with 1 and you end with 6, how many numbers did you have to travel by? Well, you went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5 numbers. So taking the endpoint of a list and subtracting it from the starting point gives you the distance of that list. How far do I have to travel to get 1 mile to 6 miles? You have to travel 5 miles, or your endpoint minus your start point, which is going to be 5. So if you take n minus m and you get 66, we know that there are 66 numbers between m and n. 66 numbers in between. The same way that there are 5 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, between 1 and 6. Okay? Now it's asking you how many integers are on the list. Well, notice how I have 6 integers up here. 5 is only the distance between 1 and 6, not including 1. So there's actually 6 integers on here. And the same thing has to happen between m and n. We know that there's 66 numbers starting after m and going all the way including n, but this whole thing does not include m. So there actually have to be 67 integers because you need to add 1 to this. This number is simply the distance between n and m. It's not including m. And this is a really easy problem just because the numbers are easy to deal with. Notice how if I wanted to do this, I would have to follow PEMDAS. I would have to go in order of the parentheses. The parentheses tell me to look at this 39 times x minus 3 divided by 3. So that's what we're going to do. But instead of multiplying 39 times x minus 3, what you could do is you could divide this 3 and this 39 and get 13. Why? Because 39 divided by 3 is 13. You can always do that. You could always divide the denominator by the thing in front of the parentheses. So if we do that, I get 13 times x minus 3 plus 39 divided by 13. And I can do the same thing again over here. What I could do is I can divide 13 by 13 and 39 by 13, and I get in parentheses x minus 3 plus 3. Okay, so x minus 3 plus 3 is equal to x, which is just going to be choice A. So pay attention. Don't go out and distribute everything and make your life difficult. Look at the denominator and the numerator. If they match, you can divide both of them by the denominator. So number 68 says jar 1 and jar 2 contain half a cup of water. Okay, so these are my, let's just say that this is a jar, that this is jar 1, and that over here this is jar 2. Okay, so that we all know that they both contain half a cup of water. So this is what's inside, and we know that they're both half full. Okay, if 1/4 of the water in jar 1 is poured into jar 2, how much water is in jar 2? So here's the thing. When we have the word of, it means multiply. It means to multiply two things together. So 1/4 of the water is the same thing as saying 1/4 times the amount of water. In this case, how much water do we have? Well, we have half a cup. So that's 1/4 times 1/2, which is 1/8. So we know that we're pouring 1/8 cup of water into jar 2. Okay, so we already have half a cup of water in here. So to that half a cup, we're adding 1/8. So that's going to be 4/8 plus 1/8, which is G, 5/8 of a cup. Okay, so now we're going to move on to number 69. Number 69 says that if n is a whole number and 0.01 is between 1/n and 1/n plus 2, what is the value of n? Okay, so we're going to have to figure out where we can actually place n, or what n has to be so that 0.01 has to be between them. And I think the best way you can do this is with a number line. Here's going to be 0. So off the bat, I can eliminate a. Why? Because you can't have a denominator that's equal to 0. If your denominator is equal to 0, it's not a real number. It's not defined. So if I have 1/n and n is equal to 0, 1/0 does not exist. It's DNE. It does not exist. It's not a real number. You put that into a calculator, the calculator will give you an error as well. So now let's just guess and check between here. Let's plug it in. So here, if n has to be 1, then 1/n, when n is 1, is just going to equal to 1. And 1/n plus 2 is just 1/3. Okay? So does 0.01 fall between 1 and 1/3? Well, let's say that 1 is here. 1/3 is about here. 1/3 is equal to 0.333. 0.01 is like all the way over here, right? That's way too small. It does not fit between those two big numbers. So choice B is out. Now we do the same thing with choice C. Let's say that n is equal to 2. That means that 1/n is going to be 1/2, and 1/n plus 2 is going to be 1/4. Okay, so let's draw that out. If 1/2 is over here, and 1/4 is just half of that, so it's 1/4 is over here. Now, 1/2 is equal to 0.5, and 1/4 is equal to 0.25. 0.01 is still all the way over here. That's way too small to be in between 0.25 and 0.5. So we eliminate that, and we choose choice D as the correct answer. Number 70 said that when asked a certain question in a poll, 72% of the people polled answered yes. Okay, so we have 72% saying yes. If 56 people did not answer yes to that question, what is the total number of people who were polled? So we know that 72% said yes. If this is a yes or no question, that means that the rest of the people had to have said no. So that's 28% who said no. Okay, why is it 28%? Because 100% of the people participated, right? If you ask everyone and everyone replies, that means 100% replied. So 100% minus 72% is equal to 28%. 28%. So we know that 28% had to have said no. We also know that 56% of people did not answer yes. So that means that 56 people is that 28%. So we know that 56 is equal to 28. And we want to know the total number of people who were polled. So if 56 is equal to 28, x is equal to 100. Okay? Notice how we're setting up a fraction here. The numbers in your fraction, this is a proportion, right? 56 is proportional to 28/100. 28/100 is 28%. Okay? What I know is that 56 people is equal to 28%. What I don't know is how many people are equal to 100%. So that's why the x has to be across from the 100, and the 56 has to be across from the 28. So if you just cross multiply, you get 5600 is equal to 28x. Solve for x, you divide by 28 on both sides. And if I do it right here, 5600 divided by 28 is equal to 200, or choice H would be the correct answer in this case. So moving on to number 71, it says that a museum has a room in the shape of a rectangle. The area on the floor is 960 square feet. In a scale drawing of the museum, 1 inch is equal to 20 feet. So in this case, we're dealing with scale drawing. So whenever you're drawing like floor plans for something, or you're planning out something that's really big, you often use the scale factor. Why? Because let's say you want to make the floor plans for like a 2,000 foot skyscraper, right? You're not going to get 2,000 feet of paper and you're not going to draw your model onto that. You're going to say, well, let's say that 2 inches on this piece of paper is actually 1,000 or 100 feet, right? And that lets you like represent that big area onto a smaller area. So we know that if the length of the room is 2 inches on the scale, so here's my piece of paper and here's my scale, we know that the length is going to be 2 inches. What is the width of this room in the scale drawing? Okay, so we want to find my width. We knowing that my scaled width, or my scale length, is 2 inches. So if I convert this into real life, we know that 1 inch is equal to 20 feet. So in this case, if we have 2 inches on the paper, we know this is 40 feet, and then this is 40 feet. We also know that the area is equal to 960 feet. We know that the area of a rectangle is length times width. So we know that x times 40 is equal to 960, or 40x is equal to 960. Now if we divide both sides by 40, we can isolate x, and we get x is equal to 24. So we know that in real life, the width is equal to 24 feet. But we're not asking for real life. We're asking for the length on the scale drawing. So if we know that 1 inch is equal to 20 feet, then how many inches, x inches, is equal to 24 feet? Okay? And all you have to do here is really just cross multiply. You can multiply 24 by 1 to get 24. And you can multiply 20 by x to get 20x. So your answer is going to be 24 divided by 20. This is going to equal to x. And if you actually evaluate that, that's going to be choice A. It's going to be 1 1/5 inches. Number 72 says a program on a computer randomly generates a sequence of whole numbers from 1 to 9 inclusive. If the computer generates a sequence of 300 numbers, what is the best prediction of the odd numbers in the sequence? So the only thing this computer program does is it generates numbers 1 through 9. And they're inclusive, which means that this program generates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Inclusive means that it's including the two numbers that are stated. So it's not whatever's in between them, it's whatever's in between them in addition to these numbers, okay? So this is the only thing the computer generates. It generates 1 through 9 however many times you want. So it's saying if it generates 300 numbers, if it does this stuff 300 times, okay, then what's the best prediction for the number of odd numbers in a sequence? So how many odd numbers are in this sequence? Well, you have 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5/9 of this, right? Or 5/9 of these numbers are going to be odd. So if I generate this sequence again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, the same proportion is going to be true, right? We're still going to have 5/9 or 5/9 odd numbers. But in total, we're actually going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 numbers. Or 5/9 times 2. And now we have 2/2. Now we have 10/18, right? We have 18 in total, but we have 10 odd numbers. So notice how this is always going to be true. This 5/9 is always going to be true. It's always going to tell us the number of odd numbers we have in comparison to the number of regular non-odd numbers, or in total. No matter how much. We just saw this when we generated it twice. We're going to have a total of 18 numbers, but 10 of them are going to be odd because if one sequence 5 are odd, then you double that, you're going to get 10. Now they're asking you for about 300 numbers. So we do the exact same thing. We do 5/9, which is going to be my proportion, times 300. Okay? This proportion 300 times is going to give you the total amount of odd numbers. So in this case, It's going to be about 166.666 repeating, which is, we can just round up to choice H. Okay, so again, we find the proportion, where we find the number of odd numbers per iteration, and we just multiply that by 300, and that's the best estimate we get. Number 73 says a truck rental company charges a one-time fee of $40 plus $1 per mile driven. Okay, so this is the equation. If you want to calculate your cost of renting from them, it's going to be a one-time fee. So this $40 is always just going to be there one time. You're adding it once, in addition to $1 per mile. So every mile is $1. So let's just say you drive X miles. If you drive 5 miles, that's going to be $5. 6 miles, $6. So we can just represent that by 1 times X or 1X. So we know that Dahlia rented her truck and used a coupon for 20% off the total rental cost. After the coupon was applied, she spent a total of $60. So how many miles did she drive? So we know that she used a coupon for 20% off the total rental cost. So did she actually pay the 100%? Did she pay the total cost? No, she paid 20% off of it, or 80%. So we know that $60 is equal to 80%, or 0.8, 80% of whatever's left, or 80% of X plus 40. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to divide both sides by 0.8. It's the same trick that I taught you guys like a couple problems ago. If you have a number outside of the parentheses and you don't want to distribute it in, you can divide it by the same number on both sides. So in this case, 60 divided by 0.8 would actually be 75. So you know that 75 was 100% of what she paid, right? And 20% of 75 is going to be 15, and 15 minus 75 is going to be 60. So this 75 is equal to X plus 40. Now all we do is solve for X. So we subtract 40 on both sides, and we get that X is equal to 35. So she had to drive 35 miles, in addition to the 40 flat fee, or the initial cost. 74 said the probability of drawing a red candy at random from a bag of 25 candies is 2/5. After 5 red candies are removed from the bag, what is the probability of randomly drawing a red candy from the bag? So what is probability? Probability is what you want, or more specifically, what you want to happen, divided by everything that could happen. So for instance, if I have a jar of 3 marbles, and I have 1 green, 1 red, and 1 blue, and I want to find my probability of, I don't know why it's doing that, my probability of finding 1 blue marble, it's what I want to happen. I want to find 1 blue marble divided by everything that could happen. Well, I could find the green marble, I could find the red marble, and I could pick a blue marble, so that my probability is going to be 1/3. Okay? And remember that since it's a fraction, it could always simplify. So in this case, the probability of drawing a red candy at random is 2/5. But we also know that it's from a bag of 25 candies. So my total has to be 25. So if I multiply this by 5/5, I get 10/25. So now I have 25 in total, right? Your denominator is always going to be your total. So I can choose from 25 candies, but only 10 of them are going to be red. So I want to choose those 10 red candies from those 25. Okay? So all you really have to do here is from the total, find the actual proportion. This is the original probability that they simplified into 2/5. So after 5 red candies are removed from the bag, what is the probability of drawing a random red candy? So if we take away 5 red candies, there are now 20 candies in the bag in total. And instead of me being able to choose from 5 red candies, I can only choose from, instead of me being able to choose from 10 candies, I can now only choose from 5 because I took away 5 from it. Then 5/20 is equal to 1/4, which is choice H. Number 75 says that adding each number in a sequence is formed by doubling the previous number and then adding 1. If the 9th number in a sequence is 63, what is the 10th minus the 7th number? So this is a rule that we follow when we start a sequence. Let's just say that the first number of the sequence is 4, okay? And I want to find the next sequence. Follow the rule. It's given by doubling the previous number. So doubling the previous number is 4. So that's going to be 8. And then adding 1. So 8 plus 1 is 9. Okay, so the next number is 9. Then you can do the same. Doubling the previous number, that's going to be 18 plus 1 is 19. So that's how this pattern works. Okay, always follow the pattern. Then what they're saying is the 9th number is 63. So 63 is the 9th number. And we want to find the 10th number. So the number after it minus, this is the 10th, minus, not the number before it because that would be the 8th, but the number before the 8th or the 7th number. Okay, so how can we go about this? How can we find this? So all you can do is just go in reverse. So if the first thing we did was double and then add 1, how about we find the opposite of that? Well, what's the opposite of adding? Well, it's subtracting. So let's subtract 1. And then what's the opposite of doubling? Well, let's halve it, or halve it, or divide it by 2 in this case, right? What's the opposite of multiplication? Well, it's going to be division. So you divide by 2. So what's 63 minus 1? That's going to be 62. And what's 62 divided by 2? It's going to be 31. Okay, so the 8th number is going to be 31. Then let's subtract 1 and divide by 2. 31 minus 1 is 30, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. So we know that the 7th number is 15. And now we can go in our regular order to find the 10th number. 63 times 2 is going to be 126, and 126 plus 1 is 127. So what's 127 minus 15? And I'm going to get 112 as my answer, or choice C as my answer. Okay, over here we're going to move on to number 76. It says that at a skating championship, there are 7 judges who award a score for each skater's performance. The highest and lowest scores to the skaters are discarded, and the mean of the remaining scores is then calculated and reported as the final score. So in this case, they want us to find the final score. So they want us to drop the highest and lowest ratings, and then find the average of that. So in order to find his lowest and his highest scores, let's just draw this or write this out in increasing order. So if we look at this, 8.2 seems to be the smallest piece of data here. So we have 8.2, then he scored an 8.4, which is higher. Then he scored an 8.5, which is higher. Then he scored an 8.6, which is higher, followed by an 8.8 and an 8.9. Okay, and then he scored a 9, which we're not going to count. And we're also not going to count this 8.2 because the 9 and the 8.2 are both his highest and lowest scores. So now all you have to do is just find the mean, right? How do you find the mean? Well, you add everything up and you divide it by how many there is. So finding the mean is 8.4 plus 8.5 plus 8.6 plus 8.8 plus 8.9, all divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 pieces of data. So if you add everything together and divide, you get 8.64, or choice G. Moving on to number 77, it says that a piece of wood that is 4½ feet long is cut into 2 pieces of different lengths. The shorter piece has a length of x feet, which inequality expresses all possible values of x. So if something's cut into 2 different lengths, it's not cut in half. So for example, if I cut a 4-inch piece of wood in half, this side is going to equal to 2 inches and this side is going to equal to 2 inches. Notice how they do not have different lengths. These are the same lengths. The only time you can ever cut something and have both sides be the same length is if you have it. So if x needs to be the longer or shorter side, it cannot be equal to half of this. So what is half of 4 1/2? Well, it's 2 1/4, okay? If I have a piece of log or piece of wood that's 4½ feet long and I cut it in half, this side is 2 1/4, this side is 2 1/4. So the shorter piece obviously has to be bigger than 0, right? It can't equal to 0 because then you wouldn't cut it. So just by looking at that, we can eliminate choice B, because a greater than equal sign means that that piece can equal to 0. That piece cannot equal to 0 because if the piece is 0 inches long, that means it doesn't exist. We never cut it. And here we're dealing with a cut. Okay, in order for you to cut something, you have 2 lengths, right? 2 pieces that have some distance to them, okay? So it has to be distinct, definitively, it has to be bigger than 0, and it has to be less than 2 1/4, okay? It can't be less than or equal to 2 1/4 because that means it could be 2 1/4. If it is 2 1/4, it's half. So for x to be the shorter piece, it has to be smaller than half. Okay, so it has to fall between 0, be bigger than 0, but be less than 2 1/4. 78 says, what is the area in square units of the shaded region shown above? In order to do this, we can just look at this as one big square. Okay, and from this square, we can kind of carve out the shaded region. So we know that the square is 20 by 20. 20 times 20 is equal to 400. Okay, so this whole area of the square is equal to 400. Okay, then what we need to find is the shaded region. Okay, the area of the shaded region. So let's carve it out. Well, the first thing we need to take away from this total 400 is this part of the triangle right here. In other words, this triangle is 20 by 20. The area of a triangle is A is equal to 1/2 base height. So 1/2 times the base, which is 20, times the height, which is 20, is 1/2 times 400, or 200. Okay? So from this total area, we're going to take away 200, and we're also going to take away this bottom portion here, which has a height of 15 and a length of 10, which is 150, times 1/2, which is going to be 75. So 400 minus 200 minus 75 in this case is going to equal to 125, or choice F. That's going to be the area of this. 79 says that yesterday in Centerville, the highest Fahrenheit temperature F was 86 and the lowest temperature was 68. What is the difference between these temperatures in degrees Celsius? Okay, so all you have to do is convert these into degrees Celsius. So we know that the highest was 86. So F is equal to 86. So 86 has to equal to 9/5 C plus 32. Okay? Remember, F is Fahrenheit in this case, so plug in Fahrenheit. So all you have to do is subtract 32 on both sides. You're going to end up with 54 is equal to 9/5 C. If you multiply both sides by 5, you're going to, and then divide by 9, or in this case, just a reciprocal. 9/5 times 5/9 is equal to 1. And 54 times 5/9, sorry about that, my program is a bit glitchy right now, it's going to equal to 20. So 86 degrees is equal to 20 Celsius. And now you have to do the exact same thing for the other, sorry, this is going to equal to 30. And now that you found out that 86 degrees is equal to 30 degrees Celsius, you have to do the same for the other side. So you have to write 68 is equal to 9/5 C plus 32. Subtract 32 on both sides, and you're going to be left with 36 is equal to 9/5 C, and then multiply by 5/9 on both sides. And you get that C is equal to 20. So now you know that the 86 degrees temperature is equal to 30 degrees Celsius, and the 20 degree temperature, the 68 degree temperature is equal to 20 degrees. 30 minus 20 is equal to 10, which is choice A for 79. Moving on to 80, it says that let x be an odd number. In terms of x, what is the sum of the two even numbers closest to x? Okay, so if x is an odd number, let's say that x is equal to 3. Okay, what are the two odd numbers next to 3? Well, it's going to be 2 and it's going to be 4. Now, what is 2? Well, 2 is just 3 minus 1, and 4 is just 3 plus 1. So if you have a number x, let's say we don't even know what this 3 is. Let's just say that we know it's x. The number after it is going to be even, and the number before it is also going to be even. So if I want to find the number after it, that's x plus 1. If I find the number before it, that's x minus 1. Okay? So if you have an odd number, there's always going to be an odd number to the left of it, sorry, an even number to the left of it, and an even number to the right of it. Then they're asking you for the sum, which is to add the two even integers closest to x. So they want you to add x minus 1 plus x plus 1. So that's x minus 1 plus x plus 1, which is just going to equal to 2x, which is choice F. 81 said that in 1991, the total public debt of the US was about $3.6 trillion that year. There were about 250 million people in the United States, which is the best estimate for the public debt per person that year. So if you want to find the debt per person, that's dollar over person, which would require you to do 3.6 trillion, which is a lot of zeros. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. This many zeros divided by 2,500, which is an equally like a crazy amount of zeros. Okay, but there's a trick to this, and you could just cancel out the zeros so that you're dealing with two smaller numbers. So notice how I wrote it on top of one another. I wrote these two numbers on top of one another so that I can cross out their zeros. Because whenever you're dividing it by numbers, for example, 10 divided by 20, or let's just say, let's make it easier. Let's do 20 divided by 10. 20, how many times does 10 go into 20? 2 times. This is the same thing as getting rid of these two zeros and just doing 2 over 1, which is 2. So this is what I'm doing. I'm getting rid of the zeros that are making this number big and scary. So if I keep on getting rid of these numbers, I'm going to be left with 360000, or 360,000 divided by 25, which really isn't that bad. This is a doable problem, right? And if you do, and you go ahead and you divide this, this is going to equal to $14,400. Okay, so never write out all of the zeros. Try and cancel out the zeros first, and then go about solving the problem. Number 82 says that in the figure above, n is the midpoint of MQ. Okay, so if we look at this, we have M, and all the way over here we have Q. Okay, and we know that n is going to be the midpoint of it. N is the halfway mark. Okay, which segment has the length of 2x minus y centimeters? Okay, so which one of these is equal to 2x minus y? Well, let's look at it. We know that n is the midpoint, which means that from m to n is the same as from n to q. Okay, so 2x in this case, 2x is going to be the distance from m to n and from n to q. So we know that mq is actually equal to 2x, or it's this entire line segment. Now, if we take this entire line segment and we subtract y from it, and up here is y, going from here to here. If we take away this y, what am I left with? Well, I'm left with the blue, which is PQ. So 2x minus y has to equal to E, which is PQ. 83 says, what is the area of the parallelogram shown above? The area of a parallelogram is equal to base times height. It's not equal to base times length. Do not forget that. This is not the height. This is the height. The 20 feet is the height. This is something else. The correct answer here is going to be 30 times 20, which is B, 600 square feet. The trick answer here is going to be 30 times 25, or 750. Do not choose 750. The area of a parallelogram is base times height. So in this case, my base is 30 times my height, which is going to be 20, which is 600. Okay? So now we're going to move on to number 84. It says that on Wednesday, a baker produced 100 more loaves of bread than were produced on Tuesday. On Thursday, the baker produced 50 fewer loaves than were produced on Tuesday. If the total number of loaves produced on all 3 days was 230, how many loaves were produced on Wednesday? So we know that. Let's just make a timeline of what's happening here, right? Let's just say that here is Wednesday. We know that on Wednesday, she made 100 more loaves than were produced on Tuesday. So this is 100 plus how many were on Tuesday. Okay? Then on Thursday, the baker produced 50 fewer loaves than were produced on Tuesday. So on Thursday, they had a less productive day. Let's say they had issues with the supplies, and they did 50 fewer loaves than were on Tuesday. So you're taking however many breads they made on Tuesday, and you're subtracting 50 from it. Okay? If the total number of loaves produced on each of these 3 days is on all 3 days is 230, how many are produced on Wednesday? So if I add up all of these numbers, if I do 100 plus Tuesday, and I'm just going to represent Tuesday as a capital T at this point, because that makes it easier. So 100 plus T, which is Wednesday, plus T minus 50, plus Tuesday itself, T, it's equal to 230. So just solve for T, right? So you have 100 plus T minus 50 plus T. So you know that you have 3T minus 50 is equal to 230. Add 50 on both sides, and you're left with 3T is equal to 280, and that the amount of loaves that you baked on Tuesday is going to equal to 60. You're going to be 60 loaves that you baked on that day. Okay? And also, sorry, I made a mistake with my math. 230, it's not going to be plus 50, it's going to be minus 50. Okay, you're going to have to subtract that by that on both sides. You're going to get 3t is equal to 180. So you have 180 loaves, and t is going to equal to 60. Okay, so that's what we're left with. This should be plus, right? Because 100 minus 50 is not negative 50, it's going to be positive 50. And you subtract 50 on both sides, and you get 180. So t is equal to 60. There's 60 loaves here on Tuesday. The answer is not going to be 60 because they're asking you for how many you produced on Wednesday. So if we produce 60 loaves on Tuesday, and the problem says that Wednesday is equal to 100 plus Tuesday, and we did 60 on Tuesday, it means that the amount of breads that we made on Wednesday is going to be 160, or 100 plus the 60 that we did on Tuesday. In the table above, what is the mean quiz score? So they're asking you to find the mean. Now, the way that you're going to do this is you're going to add up every single person's test score and divide it by the total amount of people in that classroom. Okay? So you're not going to do 9 plus 7 plus 4 plus 5 plus 3. That should not go in your numerator. That's wrong. Why? Because this is not the score. Those are the number of students. Okay? You're also not going to do 60 plus 70 plus 80 because that doesn't show you how many students got what score. What you're going to do is you're going to do 60 plus 60 plus 60 9 times, and then 70 plus 70 plus 70 7 times. Or you can just multiply it. Okay? Because 60 people, 9 people scored a 60, which means you're going to have to add up those 60s either way. And the faster way to do that is just to multiply. So we have 540. Then you know that 7 people scored a 70, which is going to be 490 points. Then you know 4 people scored a 80, which is going to be 320. Then 5 people scored a 90, which is 450. And finally 300 people scored, or 3 people scored 100. So this is the total amount of scores. This is every single person's test score right here. And if you add all of those together, in this case, you're going to get 2,100. So 2,100 is a total score for everyone. And then you're going to have to divide that number by however many students there are. If you add the total amount of students together, you get 28. And 2,100 divided by 28 is going to equal to C, 75. Moving on to number 86, it says that it asks you which inequality or which graph represents a solution to the inequality x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 3. So what you want right now is to get this in terms of x. So you want to subtract x of 4 from both sides, and you get that x is greater than or equal to negative 1, which means that x has to be at the smallest value x can be is negative 1, and then it has to be bigger than that. The only choice that explains that is choice E. So 86 has to be E. X is greater than or equal to 1. The shaded part of this number line means that x can be along this. So notice how every single number along here is either negative 1 or something that's bigger than negative 1, which is why E is going to be the right answer. Number 87 says that the reciprocal of 1/4 is added to the reciprocal of 3. What is the reciprocal of the sum? Well, a reciprocal is a number divided by 1. Or a number that's over 1. 1 over that number. So for example, if I want to find the reciprocal of 3, it's that number over 1, or 1/3. Okay? In other ways, you're flipping the number. Okay? So 3 is the same thing as saying 3 over 1. If you find the reciprocal, you just flip it, and you get 1/3. Okay? That's the trick for a reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/4 is going to be 1/4 flipped, which is 4. Okay? So you're adding 4 to the reciprocal of 3, which is 1/3. So you have 4 plus 1/3. Okay? If you're doing 4 plus 1/3, that's going to equal to 12 over 3 plus 1 over 3, which is 13 over 3. Is 13 over 3 your answer? No, you need to find the reciprocal of that, which is going to be 3 over 13. So all you have to do, sorry, it's not choice D, it's choice A. All you have to do is just flip that fraction back around to get 3 over 13. Number 88 says Nura made a square poster with a side length of 13 inches. Latrice made a square poster with a side length of 15 inches. What is the difference in square inches between the area of Latrice's poster and the area of Nura's poster? So we know that they made a poster with a side length of 13 inches, okay? And this is, we don't really know what shape, it is a square, so we do know what shape it is. So the area of a square is equal to side times side, or A is equal to S squared. So we know that when it comes to Nura's poster, her area is going to be 13 squared, or her area is going to equal to 169. When it comes to Latrice's poster, her area is going to equal to 15 squared, or her area is going to equal to 225. Now, what the difference between the area of their posters in square inches is going to be 225 minus 169, which is going to be E56. Okay. So number 89 says the table shows the cups of ingredients used to make 4 servings of oatmeal. What is the unit rate for the cups of oats per cup of water? Remember that we had a similar problem to this all the way at the beginning of the test. It's asking us for a unit rate, aka how much of something do I need per only one of something else? So what's the unit rate of cups of oats per cups of water? How many cups of water? Well, it's per 1 cup. Remember, this is a rule. I'm not making this up. This is an actual thing on the test. Whenever you have a ratio that has per inside of it, and there's no number there, it's going to be per 1 of that thing. So how many cups of oats do I need per 1 cup of water? Well, let's look at this ratio. So far, I need 2 over 3 cups of oats for every 3 1/4 cups of water. But how many cups of oats am I going to need for just 1 cup of water? Well, let's do the same thing we did in that case. Let's convert the one ratio into another. Let's convert this ratio into another. The way that I want to do that is I want to first make 3 1/4 into an improper fraction, which is 7 over 4. So we know that 7 over 4 is equal to 3 1/4. Sorry, 13 over 4 is equal to 3 1/4. Okay, so we know that the ratio now is 2/3 cup of oats to 13 over 4 cups of water. Now, if I want to turn this into 1, I multiply by the reciprocal, so I just flip it. So I multiply both sides by 4 over 13. 4 over 13 times 2 over 13 is the ratio, or how many cups of oats you need for 1 cup of water. Okay? So in this case, that's going to be 8 over 39, which is choice B. So always remember that unit rate is going to be per 1 of something. The way that I like to do it is I like to set up a ratio like this. The way that you can do it is you could just cross multiply and then solve for x. Okay, you could just put a fraction there and cross multiply. I like to skip that part and just turn the top into the bottom. Number 90 says that if, in parentheses, 3 over 5 minus 1/2 times x is equal to 1/4 plus 2/3, what is the value of x? So all you really have to do here is do order of operations. Okay, I have numbers in my parentheses. It's not like I have 3/5 minus x. I don't have that. I have 3 over 5 minus 1/2. I can do that. So let's just do that. 3 over 5 minus 1/2 is the same thing as saying 3 over 5 minus 5 over 10, which is, same thing as saying 6 over 10 minus 5 over 10, which is 1 over 10. So now you have 1 over 10 in parentheses times x is equal to, and again, this is not in parentheses. I can just do this. I can combine like terms straight off the bat. I can combine like terms here as well. I have 1 over 4 plus 2 over 3, which is going to equal to 3 over 12 plus 8 over 12, which is 11 over 12. Okay? This is equal to 11 over 12. So now you have x over 10 is equal to 11 over 12, and I could just cross multiply from here on out. So x times 12 is equal to 12x, and 10 times 11 is equal to 110. If I divide both sides by 12, I get x is equal to 110 divided by 12. And if I simplify this, I can simplify it into 55 over 6 by dividing the top and the bottom by 2. So the answer to 90 is going to be choice H. Number 91 says, in a certain state, the sales tax increased from 7% to 7.5%. What is the increase in the sales tax on a $200 item? Okay, so if the item was equal to $200, under the old sales tax, right, which was 7%, how much is it equal to? Well, the way you calculate tax is you just multiply the total price, pre-tax, by the tax rate. So the tax rate is 7, so 200 times 0.07 is going to equal to 14, okay? So that's going to be 14. And then, what is the increase in the sales tax on a 200 item? We increase from 14, and then when it's equal to 200, when we buy the same $200 item and the tax rate is now 7.5%, we do 700 times 0.075, and we get 15. So now the brand new price of my item is $15, which means that the increase in the sales tax was $1. It increased by exactly $1. We went from 14 all the way up to $15 because of this 0.5% increase in the tax rate. Moving on to 92, it asks us to evaluate the absolute value of -8 minus 12 plus -17 minus -31 minus the absolute value of 24. Okay, so again, a lot of numbers, but it's not complicated. Why? Because we're going to follow one rule, which is go from left to right. As long as you go from left to right when everything is either addition, subtraction, you're going to be fine. So going from left to right, we have -8 minus 12 plus -17 minus -31 in absolute values. So -8 minus 12 is going to equal to -20. Okay? Why? Because if you owe your friend $8 and you take away $12 more from them, you actually owe them $8 and $12 or $20. You're $20 in debt. Okay? So that's the first thing. Then we have plus minus 17. Now, every single time that you have a plus and a minus, the minus is always louder. The minus is always going to overtake. So plus minus is the same thing as just saying negative or minus. So now I have -20 minus 17, and we follow the same analogy. If I owe my friend $20 and I take away 17 from him and I borrow 17, I owe him even more money. So now I'm going to have -37. So -37 minus -31. And here we have to remember the rule that, again, I told you at the beginning of the video. If you have a minus and a minus sign together, that's the same thing as saying plus. So it's -37 plus 31, which is going to equal to -6. So we're finding the absolute value of -6 minus the absolute value of 24. What is the absolute value? The absolute value is just the not negative version of that number. So the not negative version of 6 is 6, and the not negative version of 24 is just 24. Oh, but 24 was already not negative. Doesn't matter. If it's not negative, it's the same number. If it's negative, they just get rid of the negative sign. So 6 minus 24 is equal to -18, which is going to be the correct answer, or F. Number 93 says, the table above shows cell phone sales by color. What percentage of the cell phones sold were blue? Okay, so we know that we actually don't know how many of each phone was sold except for black. We know that 30 black phones were sold, but everything else has to do with K, this magic number. If I want to know what percentage of the cell phones sold were blue, I actually need to find out how many blue cell phones there were in the first place. I need to find out what 30 minus 2K is equal to. Now, this is the percentage of what was sold. So I know that if I add it all up, I add 8K plus 30 minus 2K plus K plus 5, all of this is going to equal to 100. Okay, so let's just combine like terms. 8K minus 2K is 6K. 6K plus 6K plus K is equal to 7. So if I combine all my K's together, I get 7K. Then 30 plus 30 is equal to 60. And 60 plus 5 is equal to 65. So 7K plus 65 is equal to 100. If I subtract 65 from both sides, I get that 7K is equal to 35 and that K is equal to 5. If I divide both sides by 7, which I need to. Okay, so now that K is 5, and this is the percentage of cell phones sold, all I need to do is just plug in 5 for that. So if the percentage of cell phones sold is 30 minus 2K, I know that K is equal to 5. That's 30 minus 10, or 20. So it has to be B, 20%. Okay? The reason why I'm not dividing this by the total amount is because this is already representing the percent. So you don't have to do anything after that. 94 says, on the number line above, the distance between X and Y is 1 unit. And the distance between Y and Z is 2 units. What is the distance in units between Y and the midpoint of X and Z? Okay? So the midpoint of X and Z is going to be half of the distance. So and that's always going to be a rule. The midpoint is equal to half of the distance. So in this case, my distance is how much? Well, from X to Y is 1, and then from Y to Z is 2. So my total distance between these 2 points in this case is going to be 3. So if my midpoint is half of my distance, my midpoint in this case is going to be 1.5. Okay? So now it's asking you, what is the distance between Y and the midpoint of X and Z? So if Y starts at 0 and ends at 1, we know that the position of Y is 1. Now, how far away is 1 from 1.5? Well, it's 0.5 units away, so it has to be choice E. Okay? How do I know that Y is at the position 1? Because we start at X, which is going to be 0. We go all the way 1 from 0, or 0 plus 1, which lands us as 1. And we found half of the total distance, x and z. The total distance of xz was 3. Half of 3 is 1.5. 1.5 is right here. 1.5 minus 1 is equal to 0.5, which is the answer. 95 asks us, by what percent did the price of a cup of coffee increase if its price was increased from 1.25 to 1.35? So percent change or percent increase is just going to equal to, in this case, the absolute value of old minus new divided by old times 100. So in this case, we're going to do the absolute value of 125 minus 100, or the other way around in this case. It doesn't really matter because we have the absolute value there. But we have to do 1.35 minus 1.25 divided by my old price, which was 1.25, and multiply it by 100. So I'm taking the absolute value of 0.1 or 0.10, which is going to be 0.10, dividing that by 1.25 and multiplying it by 100. And this is going to give us the percent increase for this problem. If we do that math, it's going to give us about 8. Okay? So 0.1 divided by 0.1 divided by 1.25 is going to be 0.08, and 0.08 times 100 is going to equal to 8, so it's 8%. This 100 is to convert this decimal into a percentage, by the way. Number 96 says that Raquel is cutting out a piece of cardboard to make a pyramid. She will use a square piece for the base and identical rectangular pieces for the side. The figure above shows the dimensions of the triangle for each side. What will be the total surface area in square units of the pyramid, including the square base? So this is what it's going to look like. We have a square base at the bottom, and then each one of the sides is going to be a triangle, okay? And they're going to be 4 sides. So if I want to find the total surface area, that's equal to all of the areas on the surface. So including the base, right? They say including the square base. So this 10 is going to be a part of that square base, and we're going to draw up pyramids from there. So the area of the square base is going to be 10 squared, or 100, okay? Now, what's the area of the sides, right? Remember that each one of these is a side to that triangle, okay? Which means I need to find the area of it. Well, the area of a triangle is just 1/2 base times height. I know my base is 10 inches, okay? So here I have 10 times my height, which is 12 times 1/2, okay? So 10 times 12 is 120. 120 times 1/2 is 60. So the total area of each side is going to be 60. I know that I have 4 of the sides because a square pyramid is going to have 4 pyramids, or 4 triangles, 4 sides, right? Because they all start from the 4 sides of the square. So I have 60 times 4 plus 100, which is going to be 240 plus 100, which is going to be 340, or choice G for 96. Okay, number 97, it says that the price of the sandwich was raised from 6.25 to 6.75. What is the percent increase in the price? That's crazy how they put the same 2 problems directly across from one another. Again, this is probably a sign to remember this formula, that percent change is equal to old minus new over old, the absolute value of old minus new over old. So in this case, we have to do 6.25 minus 6.75, absolute value of that, divided by 6.25 times 100. Or in this case, you're doing 0.5 over 6.25 times 100. And then when you go ahead, solve that really annoying math, sorry about that, you're going to get choice B. Number 98 says that Terrell played 5 computer games and earned a mean score of 8 points per game. If his mean score for the first 4 games was 7 points per game, how many points were in his score in the 5th game? So you know that mean is the total value divided by the number of events, the number of things that happened. So you know he plays 5 computer games and he earned a mean score of 8 points per game. Okay, so the total value of his score, so his total score for all 5 games divided by those 5 games is 8 points, right? That's how many he scored per game. If his mean score for the first 4 games was 28 points, was 7 points per game. If you have your total score divided by 4 and it's equal to 7, multiply both sides by 4, and you know that in total for those 4 games you scored 28, okay? So we know that his total score is equal to those 4 first games, or those 28, plus the 5th game. divided by 5, and it's going to equal to 8. So you want to know how many points were in his fifth game. How many points did he have to score to increase his average from 7 all the way up to 8? Well, you already know that he scored 28 points in total for his last 4 games, right? Why? Because we know that his average for the 4 games was 7. Okay, which means that whatever the total was divided by 4 is equal to 7. The only number that makes that true is 28. Okay, so 28 plus the 5th game is equal to 8. Multiply both sides by 5, and you get that 28 plus 5th is equal to 40. You subtract 28 from both sides, you can get 12. So on the 5th game, he had to get 12 points, which is choice G. Number 99 says that Liam bought enough oranges to fill 4 bags, okay? And each bag contained 8 oranges. The total cost was $11.52. At that rate, how much would Liam pay for 42 oranges? So how many did he pay right now? Well, we know that he bought enough oranges to fill 4 bags, okay? So he bought 4 bags of oranges. We know that in those 4 bags, each bag contains 8 oranges. So he bought 32 oranges in total. Okay? So we know that he paid $11.52 for 32 oranges. So divide this $11.52 by 32 in order to find out how much money he paid per orange. How much money did he pay per orange? Per orange. Sorry about that. It's 0.36 or 36 cents. That's his rate per orange. So if you want to find out how much he paid for 42 oranges, you do 42 times 0.36, and you get 15.12 or $15.12, which is choice B. Number 100 says that 3.6 divided by 0.08 is equal to what? Now, the way that you do this, if you could just look at it as a fraction, you could just do 3.6 divided by 0.018. Or in other words, how many times does 0.018 go into 3.6? Okay, that's it. Remember that the number over here goes on the outside, the number over here goes on the inside of the division hat. In order to make your life easier, you can move the decimal points. You can go 1, 2, and 3 to make that 18. So you're really dividing 18 by 1, 2, 3, dividing 18 by 3600. Okay, how much does 18 go into 36? 2 times 36, 0, 0. How many times does 18 go into 0? 0 times. How many times does 18 go into 0? 0 times. So your answer is 200, which is choice H. This is very easy, right? It's an easy problem, but I guarantee you there's going to be one like this on the test, because they always like to like kind of abuse students who love using their calculator. A lot of people forget how to actually divide or what division means. Remember that this number goes on the inside, and this number goes on the outside. Okay. Number 101 says that a tank with a 500-gallon capacity currently contains 75 gallons of water. Additional water is poured into the tank at a rate of 5 gallons per minute. Okay. After 45 minutes of adding water, what percent of the tank's total capacity will be filled? Okay. So we know that it has a total of 500 gallons can go into it. It has a 500-gallon capacity. Currently, we know that there's 75 gallons of water inside of the tank, and we know that every minute we're adding 5 gallons. Now, if 45 minutes passes and each of those minutes we're adding a gallon to that, then guess what? In order to find out how many gallons are in there, you need to do 5 gallons per minute times the 45 minutes you were pouring for, and you get 225 gallons, okay? So you have 75 plus 225 over 500. Remember that percent is equal to part over whole. So in this case, part of the tank is going to be filled. In this case, the part is those 75 plus the 225, and the whole is 500. So this is actually 300 over 500, right? So you have 300 gallons that are filled out of a total of 500 gallons. If you do the division here and you divide these two, you get C, 60%. So only 60% of it is full. So 102 says that Misha wants to use a ribbon to make 2 straps for a backpack. The ribbon costs $5 a yard. If each strap requires 1 1/4 yards of ribbon, how much will Misha pay for the ribbon? So we know that it costs $5 a yard, and it's 1 1/4 yards per strap. So how much does each strap cost? Well, if you have 1 1/4 yards and it costs $5 per yard, just multiply it by 5, okay? In order for me to multiply this improper fraction, I can just convert this into this mixed number into an improper fraction. So 1 times 4 is 4, 4 plus 1 is 5, so that's equal to 5 over 4. Times 5 is 25 over 4, which is equal to $6.25. So each strap is equal to $6.25. My answer is not F, because you need 2 straps. So what's 6.25 plus 6.25? Well, it's actually be $12.50 for the 2 straps, which is choice H. Moving on to 103, it says that a graph shows the proportional relationship between a number of test questions a student gets correct, X, and the student's test score, Y. The ordered pair 1, 5 over 4 on the graph. Okay, so we have this pair, or this coordinate, 1, 5. What does the y coordinate of the ordered pair represent? So we know that there's a relationship between the number of test questions the student gets correct, X. So we know that the 1 is the number of questions correct, and the student's test score, Y. So this is the student's score. So we know that the y in this case, the y coordinate of the ordered pair, shows the student's score if he gets that 1 question right. His score is going to increase by 5 over 4 points, okay? Which means that if he got 2 questions right, then we'd have 10 over 4 points. And 3 questions right, he'd get 15 over 4 points right. This doesn't mean that he'll get a 5 over 4 on his test. It's not his actual score. It's the score for each question, or how much his score is going to increase by each question, which means that each test question is worth 1 1/4 points, right? So that's going to be choice B. The test will last 1 1/4 hours. Doesn't make sense because we never talked about time. All of these talk about time. A and C talk about time. We never talked about that. And D says a student who answers 5 questions will earn 4 points. Remember that X is the number of questions. So X is the number of questions. So on the point 1, 4 over 5, that means that if you get 1 question right, your score is going to increase by 4 over 5 points. Number 104 says that in a survey of 200 adults in a town of Muskegon, 45 reported reading the online version of the Muskegon Bulletin the previous day. If 2,500 adults live in Muskegon, what is the which number best estimates the number of adults who read the online version of the Muskegon Bulletin the previous day? So here's how we do a survey. A survey is we ask people, and then we get a percent, and then we apply it to the whole population. So in this case, my sample here is those 200 people, okay? I'm asking 200 people if they read it. So out of those 200 people, 45 reported that they did read it. Yes, that they did read it, okay? So let's get a percent from here. In this case, 45 over 200 as a percent is going to equal to 9 over 40 if you simplify it further down, or it's going to equal to 22.5%. Okay, so based on this sample, I can say that 22.5% of people in this town are going to have read the paper or the bulletin the previous day. So if 22.5% of people said yes, and I want to know the number of adults who read the online version, so the people who said yes, I'm going to apply this percent to the entire population. The entire population is 2,500 adults, or sorry, 25,000 adults. And if I multiply this by 0.225, which is 22.5%, I'm going to end up getting choice E, or 5,600. So 22.5% of this is of 2,500 or 2,500, 25,000. So sorry, is going to equal to 5,600. Okay, that's how we do it. This is how we are always going to operate around the sample. You're going to ask people to get your sample. So you're going to ask 200 people, then you're going to get a percent. Based on the responses, you're going to put that as a numerator of the question, and then you apply it to the whole population. So we applied this 22.5% literally by multiplying it by the whole population. Moving on to 105, it says that a hiker plans on hiking 17 miles in 3 days. Which equation describes the relationship between the number of days hiked x and the number of miles traveled y? So in this case, all of these equations are in the form of y equals. Y equals, y equals, y equals. What does y equal? Well, y is the number of miles traveled, okay? So if I plug in, and x is the number of days. So if I plug in 3 for x, I should get 17 for y. How come? Because y is the number of miles traveled. If the problem literally tells us that you had to travel 17 miles in 3 days, whichever one of these equations gives me 17 miles when I put in 3 is going to be the right answer. So A is wrong because if I plug in 3 for x, I'm going to get 9 over 17. B is wrong because if I plug in 3 for x, I'm going to get 9. He did not hike 9 miles in 3 days. He hiked 17, right? So 17 should be the value of my y. If I and choice C is going to be my right answer because if I have y is equal to 17 over 3x, and x is the number of days I traveled, so let's say I traveled for 3 days, 17 over 3 times 3 over 1 is equal to 17 over 1, or y is equal to 17, which is the correct y value for this case. So 105 is C. We're going to move on to 106. It said that Carolyn walked 3 miles from her house to the library and in 2.5 miles further to the grocery store. Returning home by the same route, she walked 1 2/3 mile before stopping at a friend's house. How many miles did Carolyn have left to walk home? Okay, so let's just draw a map of what happened. So let's just say that her house is up here. And then she decides to leave her house and walk 3 miles from her home to the library. Let's say the library is right here. So we know that this is 3 miles. Okay? And then from the library, she walked 2.5 miles further. She walked 2.5 miles further to the grocery store. Returning home by the same route, she walked 1 2/3 mile. So she's returning home now. I'm going to do it in a different color. I'm going to do it in blue. So she's on her way back, and she walked 1 2/3 miles before she stops at her house, her friend's house. Okay, and we're asking how much distance does she have left to go? So she went all this way. She went 3 miles plus 2.5 miles, and now she's going back. She started heading back by 1 2/3 miles. And what's left? What's the difference between this friend's house and her friend's house? How much does she have to walk back to the library and then back home by? Well, we can literally do that by using the equation I set up in the bottom. 3 plus 1/2 is going to equal to 5 1/2, and all you have to do is 5 1/2 minus 1 2/3. Okay, and that's going to give us what's left. Why is it 3 1/2? Well, it's 3 miles to her home, and then it's 2 1/2 miles all the way to the grocery store. So this is the total distance that she traveled. She has to travel this back. Of that 5 1/2 distance, those 5 1/2 miles that she traveled from home to the grocery store, she now needs to go 1 2/3 miles backwards in the opposite direction. So you just subtract those two numbers for number 106, and you're going to get choice E. 5 1/2 minus 1 2/3 is going to equal to 3 and 5 over 6. 107 says that a child grows at 1 1/4 inches in a third of a year. What would be his yearly growth rate in inches per year? Okay, so what's his growth rate? If he does 1 1/4 in 1/3 of a year, how do I convert this 1/3 of a year into a full year? Well, I can multiply it by 3, can I not? 1/3 times 3. 1/3 or 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 is equal to 3. Sorry, is equal to 1, which is 1 whole year. So if I multiply both sides of this proportions, you're growing 1 1/4 inches every 1/3 year. 1 1/4 times 3, that's the same thing as saying 5 over 4 times 3, or 15 over 4, is how many inches he's going to grow in 1 year. And if I convert this into a mixed number, I'm going to get choice C, which is 3 3/4. But the process is still simple. Moving on to 109, it asks us what the value of 10 1/2 plus negative 5 1/3 minus negative 2 3/4 is. So again, our rule here is to go from left to right. So we have 10 1/2 plus negative 5 1/3 minus negative 2 3/4. Okay, so the first step I want to do is I want to do 10 1/2 plus negative 5 1/3, or plus minus. Again, our rule here is that whenever you see a plus minus, the minus is a lot louder than the plus, and you have to subtract. So here we have 11 over 2 minus 16 over 3. Okay, and we have to find the lowest common denominator, which is going to be 33 over 6 minus 32 over 6. It's going to equal to 1/6. Okay, now you have 1/6 minus negative 2 and 3 over 4. Okay, again, we have another rule here. When you have a minus minus, that's actually equal to plus. So minus negative, these two form together to make a plus. So you have 1/6 plus 2 and 3 over 4. Okay, again, in order to do this, I need to convert this from a mixed number into an improper fraction. This is going to equal to 11 over 4. So 1/6 plus 11 over 4. The lowest common denominator between these two is going to be 12. So you have 4 over, or in this case, 2 over 6. Because you multiply the top and the bottom by 2. You have 2 over 12. Plus, in this case, 33 over 12, which is going to be 35 over 12. Now you need to convert that back into a mixed number. It's a lot of back and forth here, which is really annoying. And you're going to get choice A, 2 and 5 over 12, so 109, which is choice B. Oh, and I entirely skipped 108 by accident. Okay, so number 108 is even easier than this. You're just asking you to multiply 3 times 0.01. 3 times 0.01 is 0.03, and you're subtracting that from 3 times 0.1, which is 0.3. Okay, so your answer is going to be negative, and it's going to be negative 0.27. So moving on to number 110, it says that Carlos has $350 in a savings account that earns 5% simple interest in each year. Whoa, sorry about that. So that's 5% simple interest each year, which means that his account is going to grow by 5% each year. How much will he have in his account after 1 year if no money is withdrawn? So here's the deal. He has $350 in his account, and every single year he's going to earn 5% more of this. So this is going to increase by 5%, the same 5% every time. So how much money will he have in the account after this? And off the bat, we can eliminate choices E and choices F, because guess what? If you're increasing your bank account and you're not withdrawing any money, you're not taking anything out of it, how is your total amount in that bank going to go down? It's not. So you have to find out what 5% of 350 is. 350 times 5% is the same thing as saying 350 times 0.05. This is equal to $27.50, okay? So now you have to do 350 plus the $27.50 that he earned as interest, and you're going to get choice G, 367. It's actually $17.50, sorry guys. It's $17.50. But the point still stands. That's how you do simple interest. This is the percent that you're going to increase by, that your account is going to, the value of your account is going to increase by. Number 111 says, what is the probability of an event occurring? The probability of an event occurring is 0.05. What is the chance that the event will occur? So a probability, like we said in one of the previous problems, is usually a fraction, right? The probability for drawing the red marbles out of the jar was 2/5, or 3/5, or 2 out of 7, or something like that, right? So it's always a probability and it's always a fraction. If it's a fraction, that means we can convert it into a decimal point. And what my point is that a probability is always going to be between, it's going to be a fraction between, or a number between 0 and 1. If the probability of something happening is 0, that means that it will never happen. That means that it is impossible to happen. Okay, the probability for a pig to naturally fly is 0. That will never happen. Okay, and if the probability of an event is 1, that means that it's always going to happen. So the probability that I am going to, like, say that I'm going to go on to number 112 while I'm recording this video is 1. It's guaranteed that I'm going to go over number 112 after I finish number 111. So a probability is always going to be between 0 and 1. 0 meaning impossible, 1 being guaranteed. It's always going to happen. So the closer your probability is to 0, the more unlikely it is to happen. And if it is 0, it's impossible. And the more close you are to 1, that means that it is going to be guaranteed. Now, if it's 0.5, if it's right in between, that means the probability is neither likely nor unlikely. So knowing that, the correct answer has to be B. Why isn't it impossible? Because there's still a chance that it happens. Even if it's a 0.05% chance, it can still happen. Okay? It would be impossible if the probability was 0. This is also not likely. This is still close to 0. This is very unlikely. So we can't choose A, and we can't choose D, neither likely nor unlikely, because this would be 0.5. So remember that our probability is always going to be between 0 and 1. It's usually a fraction, but every fraction can be converted into a decimal point, or a decimal. So the decimal has to be between 0 and 1. So number 12 says that the table below shows the number of cups of red paint and blue paint used to mix a purple paint mixture. Based on the relationship between the number of cups of red paint and the number of cups of blue paint, what is the value of y? So there's some sort of relationship between red and blue over here. Okay, the same, whatever you increase red by, you're also going to increase blue by. So the way you do this is all you have to do is just find that value here, right? Find the ratio. Okay, so if we know that 1 cup of red paint is equal to 1.5 cups of blue paint, we have 1 cup of red is equal to 1.5 cups of blue, and I have 11 cups of red. How can I go from 1 to 11? Well, I multiply by 11. How can I go from 1.5 to x? Well, you go up, or you multiply by the same number that you multiplied to get from 1 to 11. So 1.5 times 11 for number 112 is going to give you 16.5. So in this case, you did not have to do any sort of division or finding out, because they already said that 1 cup of red paint is equal to 1.5 cups of blue paint. So 11 is just going to be whatever number is here times 1.5. Notice how 4 times 1.5 is equal to 6. So this tells you the ratio that you're going to be working with here. 1 cup of red paint to 1.5 cups of blue paint. That's always going to be true here. So 11 cups of red paint, you multiply that by 1.5 to get y. Last 2 questions on this test. It says that on the number line above, what is the distance in units between the midpoint PQ and the midpoint of QR? Remember that midpoint is equal to half of the distance. So what's the distance between -3 and 1? To go from -3 to 1, your distance is 4. So the midway point is going to be 2. So 2 from each point. So 1, 2. So now the midpoint is going to be -1. Okay? The midpoint here is -1. And this is true because guess what? Point Q is 1, 2 away from it, and point P is 1, 2 away from it. So that makes sense. Okay? Now we're going to look at the midpoint between points Q and R. What's the distance between Q and R? Well, we start at 1 and we end with 6. Okay? So the distance between this is going to be 6. Okay? So it's half the distance, which is 3. So it has to be 3 from each point. So 1, 2, 3. The midpoint has to be 4. Okay? And again, we can make sure that's true by going 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So it's 3 away from both points, 3 units away from both points. Okay? So now it's saying what's the midpoint between, what is the distance in units between the midpoint of PQ and QR? So what's the distance between -1 and 4? The distance is going to be 5. Okay, why isn't it 4? Because look at the number line. Here is -1, here is 1, here's 2, here's 3, and here's 4. In order for me to go from -1 to 4, I have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 hops, which means the distance has to be 5. Number 114 says an ice cream shop sells 16 cups of ice cream for $48 and 4 cups for $12. There's a proportional relationship between the number of cups of ice cream and the cost. What is the constant of proportionality for the relationship? Again, this is the third constant of proportionality problem here. The constant of proportionality, or the unit rate, is going to be however much of something happens per, guess what, per 1 of something else. So if we sell 16 cups for $48, okay, how many cups is it per $1? Or in this case, or per cup. So we have to figure that out right now. Automatically, we can say that we're going to get per dollar less than a cup per dollar. So we know that choices E and G are going to be out of the table, because they're making it per $1, or they're turning this 48 into 1. How do you turn 48 into 1? Well, you divide both sides by 48. And 48 over 16 is going to be a number that is a decimal. And here we don't have any decimals. So we're left with choices F and H. And what F and H are doing are they're trying to find, we know there's 48, sorry, I don't know why I erased that. We know that it's 16 cups for $48. And what these are trying to do is they're trying to find the dollars per 1 cup. And this we can actually do because if we divide both sides by 16, we get 1 cup per $3. Or choice F. That's 114, which is the last problem or the last question of this entire practice test. That's the entire math section that we went over in this video. If you have any questions or you still have any questions on this test, please let me know in the comments below. I will get to them. I'll try to answer your questions. If you want another video like this, please let me know in the comments below. If you like what you saw, please subscribe and like. It really helps. But I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a nice day.